What Peebee Did Next. Written by Toby Davis. Read by Sally Phillips.
Oh, hello. I'm Sally, and tonight's story, which is called What Peebee Did Next, is all about life and death and mourning and secrets. Peter Binkleman was known as Peebee to absolutely everyone. To his friends, to his family, everyone. Apart from his colleagues at Binkleman's Toys. They all called him Binko. Except for the workers on the factory floor who called him Sir Binkalot. Other than that, everyone called him Peebee. Apart from Nordberg, the extremely formal, middle-aged albino Swede who drove Peter and buttled and housekept in the substantial family home. Nordberg called him Mr. Binkleman. Peebee's children, Teddy and Beatrice, called him Peebee as soon as they had grown up. His doting and beautiful wife, Emily, had never known him by any other name. The whole world called him Peebee. And Peebee belonged to the world. Now, our man Peebee was a toy maker and the founder of Binkleman's Toys. He was to toys what Mozart was to notes, and Sir Alan Sugar is to pointing at people, which is to say that he was a natural, a genius. There was nothing he couldn't do with clockwork and springs and batteries and microchips and plastic and metal and a boundless imagination. He would sit at his desk wearing a gold-rimmed magnifying monocle and looking through a magnifying glass on a stick. He would sit there into the small hours and then back into the big ones. He was constantly tinkering with tiny screwdrivers and even tinier brass cogs until
"Cock-a-doodle-doo!"
he'd shout.
Peebee's done it again.
As he presented another masterpiece to his board. His board of directors were always ready and waiting to see his latest creations. Sometimes these presentations would take place at 4 a.m, for time didn't mean the same thing to Peebee as it does to you or I. But it was never a chore to see Peebee's new toy, and every man and woman in that room soon became a child again as they watched a clockwork owl flutter its wings and lay an egg, which in turn hatched into another beautiful clockwork owl, or a flying car that hovered above the ground using a system of small but extremely powerful fans, or a squirrel that hoarded nuts in the summer and collected them in the winter, or a rocket that whooshed around the room, leaving multicoloured trails of delicious-smelling steam. "You're a genius," shouted one of the directors at his latest automaton. "We'll be rich," shouted another.
Nonsense. Make 1,000 and send them to the orphanage.
For that was the kind of very kind man that Peebee was. His children adored him and believed for many years that he was in possession of magical powers, for when they were with him, amazing things seemed to happen. His wife, Emily, did not think Peebee possessed magical powers. She knew he did. But not the magic of fairy stories, the proper stuff, the kind that chased away any sadness and always made everything all right. The magic of Mummy kissing it better, but at 1,000 times the strength, of just the right patch of dappled shade and the last page of an excellent book, the magic of a perfect Yorkshire pudding, or a particularly fascinating rock pool. He was the son of the household, basically, and the rest of them were blissfully happy satellites. The only creature who didn't like him was the family dog, Rufus, and no one could ever work out why. Perhaps it was because Peebee would never let him have the bones that Cook tried to feed him.
"Bones are what keeps your soul from flying away,"
Peebee would say.
"Give them respect."
Or perhaps it was because Peebee had once, completely by accident, trodden on Rufus's tail in such a way that forevermore it had a kink in it, causing Rufus to be the butt of jokes from other hounds. When Peebee's heart stopped beating the morning before his 55th birthday, the joy was instantly replaced with emptiness and an impenetrable grey fog. The world had caved in and left the family without their son, and so darkness fell. The funeral was predictably well attended. The albino Swede Nordberg wailed so hard throughout the service that he had to be removed from the church, and his Scandinavian laments could be heard even over the choir. The family remained silent throughout, unable even to grieve, unable to accept their loss. At the end of the service, in a touch of posthumous generosity, Peebee made sure that everyone took away a little present. Nothing ostentatious, a handsome pocket knife or silver-plated napkin ring, that sort of thing. This was all part of the provision Peebee had made in his will. But as the hubbub of the funeral calmed down, a vital truth became clear to the family. Emily, Teddy, and Beatrice would never recover from the loss of their beloved Peebee. They knew that the happy part of their lives was gone, never to return. They would never be able to move on, never, never. The thought of not seeing him again was too much for them to bear. But they did see him again, the following Thursday, when he arrived at the house. There he suddenly was, standing his full 5 feet 11 inches tall, with one hand in his pocket, one hand holding a crystal tumbler, and an expression of glass-eyed benevolence on his lacquered face. You see, Peebee had been stuffed by a taxidermist named Josiah Strawman, who had done an excellent job. Accompanying him was a letter of explanation from his solicitor at Tackett, Hedgeworth, Shonder and Prigg. Peebee's last will and testament was very specific in its peculiarities, and the exhumation, preservation and taxidermation of his body was just the beginning. Emily read the late but present Peebee's instructions.
You must keep me in whatever room you are in. And make sure I'm facing you. I want to see you, my dears.
Poor Nordberg the Swede came in with a tea tray, screamed, and fainted dead away at the sight of the resurrected master of the house. It was so kind of Father to do this, so thoughtful, said Teddy, as he struggled to avoid the expressionless eyes of his father's corpse.
Yes, indeed. This was your father all over,
whispered Emily, and unsure if the knots in her stomach were due to grief or nausea. I think it's wonderful to have him back, said Beatrice, meaning the opposite. None of them could speak the truth. And so, inevitably, the situation grew worse. As I'm sure you'll remember, Peebee was a genius with clockwork, and as such there were further surprises to discover within this recently deceased philanthropist, this father, this husband, once full of laughter and light, and now full of a mixture of polyester resin, sawdust and plaster. The late Peebee also contained a surprisingly effective loudspeaker, fitted in his throat and powered by tiny solar panels in his eyes. The speaker activated itself every 7.5 minutes. It seemed that Peebee had recorded some special messages for his family, 4 in total, in rotation, every 7.5 minutes.
I'm still here!
He would bellow, and just 450 seconds later,
Scotch, please!
And then,
cock-a-doodle-doo! Peebee's done it again!
Finally, and most irritatingly,
I'm sorry, would you say that again, darling?
After which, whoever in the room had last spoken was under strict instructions to repeat, loudly and directly into Peebee's dead ear, whatever it was they had just said.
We have to do it.
The family insisted to each other.
If it's what he wanted, then we must do it. He did so much for us.
And so they did what Peebee wanted. There he would stand, demanding Scotch and attention at all hours of the day and night.
Scotch, please!
They took turns in keeping Peebee in their bedrooms, watching over them, his rictus grin always finding a patch of moonlight to be illuminated in.
I'm still here!
After a month or so of this wretchedness, the family had still not admitted to each other just how miserable they all were. One night, as Teddy sat outside on the terrace, his deceased father looking on, he lit a cigar. "Scotch, please!" his Daisy pushing paterfamilias uttered. Teddy accidentally tipped his own tumbler of scotch over his father's suit and unwittingly threw the still burning match in Peebee's direction. The accident did not have the required destructive force to rid the family of Peebee.
Scotch, please.
It only succeeded in making him a little more horrific, in a burny way. The following night, while attending to some correspondence in her bedroom, Beatrice accidentally pushed Peebee out of her third-story window. He plummeted past the French doors and smashed face first into the patio, destroying a clematis, a lavender, and a bird bath. But not himself.
I'm still here.
The day after that, Nordberg, who was working in the garden whilst under the relentless gaze of his expired employer, quite by chance, pushed the corpse into an industrial wood chipper on its top setting. But the iron spirit and iron bars within Peebee proved too much for the chipper. It seemed that Peebee was as strong a character in death as he was in life, and after each accidental attempt, the stuffed Peebee became more and more disgusting.
Cock-a-doodle-doo!
Said Peebee in a warped and slightly wood-chipped voice.
Peebee's done it again.
The family were exhausted. But Peebee had one more trick up his sleeve. Literally, I mean, something moved along Peebee's sleeve. With a clockwork whir and a clockwork click, a shiny white enamel bone plunked into Peebee's hand. And Peebee uttered one more phrase.
Here, boy.
This was too much for the family dog, Rufus, who had always inexplicably disliked him. This teasing toy bone was the last straw. In a fit of rage and violence that was so fierce, it caused his forever kinked tail to straighten out. The normally placid Rufus attacked Peebee with terrifying ferocity. He bit and scratched and tore and pulled and howled until there was nothing left. Emily, Teddy and Beatrice all swore they were just about to call Rufus off, but they were expecting one of the others to, hence their hesitation. What was left of Peebee was not a pretty sight, and they universally agreed that, wishes or no wishes, Peebee should be buried again, never to return. This was swiftly arranged, and they felt no need to alert the good men of Tackett, Hedgeworth, Shander and Prigg. After the extremely quiet second burial of Peebee, things got back to normal in the house in Specsham. Invitations were sent out, the garden opened for the summer, and Rufus was given a new and extremely comfortable bed. Happiness, that most welcome of house guests, had returned with a promise to stay and never outstay its welcome. Now, what the family didn't know is that none of this had happened by accident. You see, Peebee could work people the same way he worked his clockwork toys, and Peebee's final act of generosity was a triumph. Emily, Teddy, and Beatrice didn't miss him anymore.
Lovely. Okay.
And there we have it. Things that seem nasty can sometimes seem nice. And good deeds don't have to stop when you die, wouldn't you say? Goodbye.